The courtroom was electric with tension as the doors swung open and Blake Lively stepped inside, clutching a folder that would change everything for weeks. She had been dodging questions, backpedaling through public statements, and relying on high-priced attorneys to control the narrative, but now cornered by mounting evidence and undeniable contradictions. She finally did something no one saw coming. She admitted defeat not with grace or clarity, but with a desperate last-minute declaration. And then, in a shocking twist, she turned her frustration into a full-scale personal attack, not just on Justin Baldoni, but on the very commentators who dared to question her version of events, including me and That's. When it became clear this was no longer just a legal battle. This was a public reckoning, a celebrity unraveling in real time, exposed not by rumors or gossip, but by her own sworn statements and conflicting court filings. The woman once praised for her image of strength and elegance was now making emotional appeals, accusing reporters of twisting her words while simultaneously submitting documents that contradicted her previous testimony, and the moment she lied under oath about who said what and when, it sent shockwaves through the courtroom. This wasn't strategy, this was panic, as the judge looked on unimpressed, and Justin Baldoni remained calm. The tide turned dramatically because when the facts are laid bare, and the inconsistencies are this glaring, the truth becomes impossible to deny. This is the unraveling of a narrative that was carefully built and is now collapsing under its own weight. And what comes next may be even more explosive than what we have seen so far. Buckle up, because the story is just getting started and the fallout is going to be unlike anything Hollywood has seen in years. Blake Lively walked into the courtroom today with a look that told the whole story. Without her saying a single word, the tension was thick and every eye in the room was on her. But she didn't look at anyone. She kept her head down, clutching a folder tightly in her hand. The documents inside that folder were the beginning of what many are calling her quiet admission of defeat in the legal battle against Justin Baldoni. And yet, even as the walls seemed to close in, she decided to lash out in a move that felt less like a legal strategy and more like a personal vendetta. She made claims that shocked everyone in the courtroom, and then turned around and made completely different statements about people who have only reported on the truth. It was a moment that revealed more than just panic. It showed a side of Blake Lively that few were prepared to see over the past few weeks. This case has taken turns no one could have predicted. But this latest development feels like a culmination of everything bubbling beneath the surface. A legal war that started quietly with filings and statements has now exploded into full-blown courtroom drama with accusations flying and credibility on the line. Blake Lively, once portrayed as composed, calculated and elegant, now stands in front of the media and the court with contradictions piling up faster than she can explain them. Her lawyers started the morning by asking the judge to strike parts of Justin Baldonis' latest filing, claiming they were prejudicial and irrelevant, but the judge wasn't moved by their arguments. Instead, he asked direct questions about why certain pieces of evidence had suddenly become so concerning to the Lively team, especially since they had previously approved similar disclosures in earlier stages of the case. It was then that Blake looked visibly shaken, and for the first time she whispered something to her attorney, who immediately requested a sidebar. It was during this moment that courtroom observers noted a dramatic shift in her demeanor. Up until now, she had mostly kept quiet, letting her lawyers speak for her, but suddenly she seemed more involved, more desperate when the sidebar ended. Her lawyers returned and said they would be submitting a supplemental declaration from Blake herself, detailing her objections. And that declaration is where things got really surprising. According to those present in court, Blake claimed in her statement that she was being unfairly targeted by the media and content creators, and that her words had been twisted and used against her. She named specific individuals, suggesting their coverage had misrepresented facts and created a false narrative around her involvement in certain decisions, including her past business arrangements with companies now under scrutiny. But what stood out most was her assertion that she never intended to damage Justin Baldonis' reputation, and that her previous comments were taken out of context yet minutes. Later, when asked directly about her communication with Baldoni, she admitted under oath that she had used language that could be interpreted as inflammatory, even though she insisted it was never her intention to attack him this back and forth. Stunned the courtroom and left observers questioning how both things could be true at the same time. One minute she was denying any animosity toward Baldoni, the next she was justifying heated language in messages that are now public record, and This duality wasn't lost on the judge, who paused proceedings to note the inconsistency, asking her lawyers whether their client was now revising previously stated positions. What followed was an awkward silence and then a vague response about context. Being misunderstood, it was during this same session that Blake made a specific accusation that caught many off guard. She claimed that content creators had inserted themselves into the case in ways that influenced public perception and directly impacted her mental and emotional well-being. She said it was reckless, dangerous, and unjustified. But what she didn't mention was that much of what had been reported came directly from public court documents, filings from her own legal team or official, transcripts from hearings. This contradiction was immediately noticed by legal analysts watching the case closely, who pointed out that Blake's attempt to shift blame to online voices seemed more like deflection than a genuine concern for accuracy. The judge also asked whether her team had formally filed any defamation or cease and desist notices to the people she named, to which her lawyer replied not at this time, adding that they were still exploring their legal options. This vague threat of possible future action only intensified speculation that Blake was attempting to silence criticism rather than respond to it with transparency. Meanwhile, Justin Baldoni sat quietly watching the proceedings, taking notes, occasionally leaning in to speak with his counsel but not reacting to any of Blake's emotional outbursts or contradictions. Sources close to Baldoni say he was advised to remain composed and allow the facts to speak for themselves, a strategy that seems to be working in his favor as the tide in public and legal opinion appears to be shifting. It was also revealed in court that Blake's team had made a late-night filing, attempting to redact portions of her own deposition, a move that raised eyebrows because it was those very sections that revealed her awareness of key conversations and decisions that had previously been denied. The judge asked why those redactions were not proposed earlier, and why her team now felt those segments were damaging. The answer was vague again, referencing privacy and emotional distress. But legal experts say that once a deposition is submitted, it becomes part of the record, and attempting to remove it afterward, especially without compelling new evidence, is highly unusual and likely to be denied. And it was her reaction to that denial that revealed the most. According to multiple reports, she appeared visibly distressed, even mouthing something under her breath when the judge ruled against her motion. She then whispered to her lawyer again, and within moments, another sidebar was requested when they returned. Blake's lawyer said they had no further motions at this time, signaling that they had run out of immediate options to control the narrative from inside the courtroom. But outside the courtroom, the battle was just heating up within hours of the hearing. New statements began circulating, suggesting that Blake's team was preparing a broader media response, with one source claiming they were looking into whether certain commentators had violated ethical boundaries in their reporting. This led to an intense online debate about freedom of speech, the role of public commentary, and whether celebrities can or should try to silence criticism when they themselves have placed their reputations at the center of a legal battle, but perhaps the most telling sign that things are not going Blake's way came from a closed-door meeting reported to have taken place after the hearing between her team and a crisis communications firm known for handling high-profile damage control. Their presence suggests that what happened in court was more than just a bad day. It was a signal that her case is slipping and her public image is in jeopardy. As the hours passed, legal experts began dissecting her statements, pointing out inconsistencies between her declaration and her deposition, between what she said on the record and what her lawyers are arguing, and between her claims of being unfairly targeted and her attempts to remove already submitted evidence. It paints a picture of someone not just defending themselves, but trying to rewrite the timeline in real time, hoping that public memory is short and that sympathy will outweigh scrutiny. But in an era where everything is documented, archived, and analyzed in slow motion, that strategy rarely works. And with every new motion, every new statement, and every new attempt to control the story more, eyes are turning toward the real issue. The facts, the documents, and the undeniable truth of who said what and when. And right now, those facts are not aligning in Blake Lively's favor. As the courtroom cleared out after the dramatic hearing, whispers and murmurs filled the halls. Everyone from reporters to legal clerks could feel the shift. Something had changed, and not in Blake's favor. She had walked into the courtroom holding that folder tightly, as if it contained her last line of defense. And yet by the end of the day, it felt like she had surrendered more than she realized surrender. Not in the legal sense just yet, but in the sense of image control, in the sense of owning the narrative, and most importantly, in the sense of credibility and trust, which is harder to rebuild once lost than any legal case could ever be. The spotlight that once seemed to follow her with admiration now cast shadows of doubt, and every step she took out of that courthouse was captured by cameras and analyzed by experts who have been watching this case unravel over the last several months. And now what many are asking is whether this most recent move was a genuine misstep or a calculated risk gone wrong. The attack on Justin Baldoni, both subtle and overt, came across as reactive, not proactive. And that's what stunned most people in that courtroom. It wasn't just a legal tactic, it felt personal. She questioned his intentions, his professionalism, and even his motivations behind filing certain evidence, and yet she had no strong counter-argument to prove any of it was false. Instead, her team tried to rely on emotional appeals, suggesting that the pressure of the media and public judgment had created an unfair environment for her to defend herself. But the judge remained firm, saying that public perception is shaped by the facts presented and not the feelings expressed. This seemed to hit a nerve, and it showed. In the way her legal team started to shift tone from defensive to combative, they asked the judge to seal portions of future proceedings, claiming potential harm to their client. But again, the judge asked what new information warranted such a move. And once more, they could not provide a compelling argument. This led many to believe that what they really feared was not legal harm, but reputational fallout that would grow worse with each passing week. And it was not just Baldoni who felt the weight of Blake's shifting strategy. It was the media and commentators as well, in a highly unusual move. Her legal filings specifically referenced several journalists and online creators, alleging that their coverage had shaped the court of public opinion against her. But when asked by the judge whether any of those individuals had violated court orders or misrepresented official documents, her lawyer admitted there was no such evidence. Instead, they framed it as a pattern of unfair treatment, a claim that legal analysts were quick to dismantle, pointing out that when high-profile individuals enter legal battles, they open themselves to scrutiny. And that scrutiny is not a violation of rights. It is part of public accountability. Blake, Lively's insistence that her words were twisted, falls apart under even basic examination because the words she is upset about are in her own deposition, her own filings, and her own public statements, and trying to rewrite that now only creates more questions about her transparency, especially when those very documents show a clear timeline of choices, decisions, and contradictions at the heart of this case. And that's where Justin Baldoni has quietly gained the upper hand, not through grandstanding or public statements, but by letting the documents speak for themselves, by staying consistent in his narrative, and by allowing the court to handle the facts, not emotions, according to sources close to his legal team. This has been the plan all along. Avoid the theatrics, stick to the record, and let the contradictions expose themselves, and it's working. The more Blake tries to revise her position, the more she finds herself cornered by the very evidence she submitted at one point during the hearing. The judge asked her directly about a comment she made in a previously leaked message, referencing the strategic isolation of certain colleagues, a line that seemed to contradict her public image of unity and inclusion. Her response was that the message had been part of a longer conversation that was misrepresented, but when the full transcript was submitted by Baldonis' team, it became clear that the message was not out of context. It was exactly what it appeared to be, a candid expression of calculated maneuvering. And that is what is hurting her case the most. The perception that behind the polished exterior is someone willing to use others to maintain control and avoid accountability. And now, with her naming content creators in court documents, she is walking a very dangerous line, trying to shift responsibility for her situation onto people who simply reported on what was already public record. And this move has already sparked a backlash online, with commentators calling it an attack on free speech and an attempt to silence uncomfortable truths. Some have even posted responses daring her team to file legal action so the facts can be argued in public and on record, because they know the truth is on their side. And if this turns into a fight over who misrepresented what, it will only lead to more documents, more transcripts, and more public exposure, which, based on her recent filings, is the very thing she wants to avoid. What's also interesting is that behind closed doors, there are now discussions that her team may be considering a settlement, not because they believe they will lose in court, but because they fear losing in the court of public opinion. And that fear is very real, especially now that crisis. PR firms are involved. One source familiar with these discussions said that the goal is to contain the damage, not just legally, but culturally and socially. Because if this continues, Blake risks becoming a symbol not of empowerment, but of evasion, of using influence to control a narrative instead of facing the facts. And that is a dangerous place to be in an industry where reputation can shift in a single headline. Meanwhile, Baldoni remains silent, publicly choosing to let the storm swirl. While his team stays focused on the next steps in the courtroom and behind the scenes, there are rumors that more evidence is coming. Evidence that could challenge Blake's previous statements even further, including correspondence that was withheld initially and may now be forced into the record if the judge orders a full review of communications between key parties, and that could be the moment everything changes. Because once those communications are public, and once timelines are laid out, clearly there will be no more room for spin or emotional appeals. There will only be facts and accountability, and this is what observers are watching for now. Every move Blake makes, every statement she releases, every claim she files is being analyzed. Not just for legal strength, but for authenticity. Because the narrative of being misunderstood only works if there is genuine misunderstanding. But when the documents say one thing and the statements say another, the court and the public will choose the documents every time. So as this case moves forward, and as more hearings are scheduled, the question is not just who will win legally, but who will emerge with their integrity intact. And right now, the gap between public image and private behavior is growing wider for Blake Lively, with each desperate motion and each contradictory declaration. And unless something changes dramatically, the story will not be about who was right or wrong, but about who tried to rewrite the truth when the evidence was already clear. As the dust settles from one of the most dramatic court sessions, this case has seen the damage to Blake Lively's credibility is impossible to ignore. What started as a battle between two public figures has now turned into a much bigger story. One that exposes how image control, legal pressure, and emotional appeals can only go so far when the facts are undeniable. Her decision to attack Justin Baldoni in court only to contradict herself moments later showed more than just desperation. It showed that the foundation of her argument is crumbling. And when she shifted blame to commentators like me, claiming that our reporting twisted her words, it became clear that the strategy was not to confront the truth, but to distract from it yet. In this courtroom, facts still matter. And when the judge rejected her attempts to remove her own deposition from the record, it signaled something deeper. A legal system that refuses to bend to celebrity pressure and a public that is watching closely. Now more than ever, the contradictions in her statements, the sudden changes in strategy, and the emotional outbursts are not helping her case. If anything, they're drawing more attention to the very details she once buried. And while Justin Baldoni continues to remain composed and focused on the legal process, Blake is caught in a whirlwind of her own making. The next few weeks will be critical. And as more documents are revealed and more testimony becomes public, the pressure will only grow. This is not just about who wins the case. It's about who walks away with their integrity intact. And right now, the difference between Blake's public image and her courtroom behavior is raising more questions than answers. This story is far from over. And if this hearing was any indication, the biggest revelations are still to come.